Welcome to the wonderful world of wine, exploring all things wine with you. We are your hosts, Kim Simone and Mark Lenzi, and you can find us on Facebook at The Wonderful World of Wine. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the wonderful world of wine, exploring trending topics in the wine world and talking to interesting people in the wine world, which is what we have been doing all year long. How are you today, Mark?
Everything's great, Kim, and you?
I'm pretty good. And our special guest for today is joining us from California, and her name is Brenae Royal, and she has quite the interesting story in the wine business. She is an agriculturist as well as someone who is deep into charitable organizations that deal with wine and wine education. How are you today, Brenae?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Welcome to the show. So I would love for you to tell our listeners just a little bit about your background, how you got into wine. Then I want to talk about your winery and I want to talk about your dog too, because the dog is all over the place on your
Yes.
website. So
I got into wine by drinking it. I'd done
yeah.
FFA. Yeah, the most cliche way. And I was doing FFA and got an academic scholarship to go to Chico State and originally went in as animal science and could not cut it figuratively and literally and switched to
Oh.
crops and horticulture science and didn't really know what I wanted to do with that degree. And then started drinking wine in my last year and discovered that Gallo made my favorite wine at the time, Apothic Red. And I went up screaming and was like, you absolutely have to hire me. I have a farming degree. I've never, please let's make this happen. And they hired me a week out of graduation as a viticulture intern, an operations intern. And that was a 7 month long internship that led to a full-time position a couple months later as the viticulturalist. And then 11 months into that role became the vineyard manager. So that 12-year anniversary passed just 2 weeks ago to the day, actually. June 3rd was when I started my career at Gallo. So yeah, that's how I got into wine and it's just really flourished.
We really like to mention that sort of aha moment that a lot of people have with getting into wine. And some people, they've been drinking wine their whole life because they're either, Italian or they were raised in a family that it was just part of the culture. And you seem to kind of buck that trend. Like you had this experience as just a regular everyday wine drinker and you were like, oh my God, I love this stuff. And
Yeah.
you jumped on it, right?
Yeah, well, it was like me and my best friend just decided to graduate from margaritas one day. And we were literally walking down the wine aisle, like, we're sophisticated seniors in college. And like a grand old time for us was like Pandora radio on Spice Girls radio and Pasta, Jeopardy, a puzzle. And like now it had to be a bottle of wine.
Yeah.
And we chose Apothic Red and Big House Red because of the labels. And then we just really leaned into Apothic Red. And so I'm pretty sure we kept that Safeway in business, but it like blew my mind. I'm now like, I've evolved into like a Zinfandel aficionado because at the time that blend was a Zinfandel base. And so yeah, it's kind of odd how it all kind of came together, but we really just liked the very sexy label and had no other rhyme or reason or idea about what we were even about to drink. Other than it was not a margarita.
It's so funny that for you it was the label that
Yeah.
sold you on it, and yet I often use Apothic as this sort of like quintessential sort of gateway wine for younger drinkers in their early 20s who want to get into wine. And it's like, here's this thing that's fruity and sweet, but it's still red, and so you're like getting all of the angles of a red wine, and you just sort of happened upon it, and it did the job.
Yeah, and here I am. I mean, it's not to say we can't drink like Two Buck Chuck or Carlo Rossi. I mean, to this day, the wine that, well, that's not true. It's not to this day anymore, but the only really wine exposure I had was Pete Vella. My family, especially my grandma, drank a lot of boxed wine. And so for a very long time into my career, they still only wanted to drink that. And now they drink stuff that isn't normal Tuesday wine. So I'm like, hey, don't grab that. Like, please don't grab that. Whose birthday is it? What are we celebrating? Please don't just grab anything. So they've evolved with it. But yeah, my family, social workers, teachers, my twin sister's a teacher. My brother works for the state. And so I was raising pigs, and they don't know where they went right, but they're very happy with how it's all kind of come together.
I'm glad you started out with the Apothic story because when I was reading your background and Kim said the aha moment you had, and I saw you wearing the Apothic bottle costume, I'm thinking, I don't think I've ever met anybody in wine or a wine geek who says that was the wine they fell in love with. And you said you evolved, and I can tell that from the wines you're producing now. So that was really your aha moment to get you into wine, Apothic.
Yeah, I mean, I made that costume, by the way. That's how I like love the Apothic. And even during my internship with Gallo, I remember it was the harvest party, and everybody was like, you have to meet Deb Jurgensen, who is the director of winemaking, but she was the first winemaker on the brand. And I mean, everyone just knew like that was my jam, was Apothic, because I literally went up screaming, and even the gal that was there at the career day was like overwhelmed. And so we still laugh about it now, so many years later. But I just was like, you have to hire me. I can do this. And then certainly getting into the internship and very quickly learning kind of the ins and outs of viticulture. And then certainly taking the job as the vineyard manager of Monte Rosso, it really brought together how wine is art and passion and science. And I wasn't having to stay in only one of those buckets. It would kind of balance throughout the day or even the week or part of the season. And so, yeah, it started with Apothic. I can't say I drink too much Apothic these days, but I will forever kind of have that as my holy grail because it is so significant to your everyday wine drinkers. And then certainly people like myself who've progressed in this industry.
And I wanted to have you tell our listeners about the Monte Rosso vineyard. You were the manager for many years. A lot of people don't know about it. Can you tell our listeners the history and location and all that's involved with that vineyard?
Yeah, so Monte Rosso Vineyard is 250 acres planted, 575 acres overall out in Sonoma. And it's at its highest point, 1,300 feet elevation, and it's actually centrally located within the Moon Mountain District, Sonoma County AVA, which was established in 2013. It's got 10 varieties on site, with Cabernet Sauvignon being over half of the planted acreage. A distant second is Zinfandel, and then you've got Petit Syrah, Sangiovese, Malbec, Grenache, Petit Verdot, Syrah, and Semillon. I think I got all the kids. But what's really special about the vineyard is its age. It was established in 1886 by a man named Emmanuel Goldstein, who farmed it through Prohibition, but sold it right at the end to Louis and Martini, who then planted what is believed to be either the oldest or some of the oldest Cabernet Sauvignon vines in 1940. And so it was Louis M. and Louis P. who farmed it through the 90s and actually started selling fruit for the first time in the 90s to a man we should all know is Joel Peterson of Ravenswood, and then Robert Bialy was very quickly right behind him, and then they sold to the Gallo family in July of 2020 or 2002. So now the Gallo family owns it. It's all farmed by hand. My team and I, while we were farming the vineyard for 10 years, consolidated down to 54 blocks across all of those 10 varieties. However, the way we were farming it for external partners and internal wine partners, we had upwards of 120 different sections of how we were farming for the multiple wines that were being made on site, most of which are vineyard designates, planted in a red hill clay loam, so weathered basalt, volcanic soil, really, really rich. Yeah, it's a fantastic property, sits above the fog line. There's 9 different trellis systems, and the Cabernet Sauvignon and Zinfandel blocks all are across those 9 different trellis systems. The Semillon is 139 years old in 25 and is the oldest Semillon in the Northern Hemisphere, and then second oldest in the world that we know about. And then the Zinfandel is 133 this year. The Cab is 85. So yeah, they're there are vines out there between 4 years old and and 139 years old. And so the inherent complexity of the vineyard is why it was always one of the more treasured estates that the Gallo family held, but also one of the most difficult. And so the way the Monte Rosso vineyard sits within the grand scheme of like the portfolio is always an hour away from any other surrounding Gallo winery or vineyard. And so my team and I were really it. We were kind of acting as the satellite ranch. And so, yeah, it's a really, really fantastic place. And I got to call that place home for about 9 years because I lived on site.
And what a way to learn about the vineyards and the grape varieties and all those different things with how complex that area is, not just with the grape varieties and with the soil, but like you said, the trellising, the way of managing the grapes. Like, kudos to you for being able to learn all of that stuff in such a short amount of time, because 9 years, that's really not that long. And you were not a particularly old person at that time when you were jumping into that role.
Bright-eyed and bushy-tailed.
Yeah, not too many people in their early 20s would, would jump right into that.
Well, and I will say, like, during my internship, out of all 1,800 acres, Monte Rosso was like the high-level, difficult one. At the time, there were no vineyard block signs. You had to know where you were. The guys, you definitely had to go through their trust process. And so I remember even when I took over as the vineyard manager, in their broken English, they told me I had to learn better Spanish. And so it became a running joke. But yeah, I can say I didn't care for Monte Rosso because I was always covered in like 3 different layers of dirt, and there were rattlesnakes everywhere. And it wasn't as maybe clean cut like McMurray Vineyard up in Russian River. This is a very rustic, just challenging ranch. I ran over my work phone on my first day ever at Monte Rosso and was thinking, I'm going to get fired. You know, like I hear this viticulturalist had me riding this ATV on a 42-degree slope, and somehow my phone fell out of my pocket and we tracked it back to where we were. And yeah, I had a hell of a day on June 5th, 2013. So
makes for good stories though, right?
yeah, I can say though, I didn't care for the vineyard. And then when I moved there, I think it was like 2 weeks in that I was like, oh, like this is something that I could have never known was going to be on my bucket list. And how lucky am I to be on this slice of heaven? So I, to this day, adore that place.
So, Brenae, you're working with Gallo 12 years, and all of a sudden you decide you want to start your own wine project, the Violet's Paradise project. Yeah. What made you want to do that, leaving one of the premier, biggest wine companies in the world and venture out on your own?
Yeah, so I had actually left Gallo a year and some change ago now, right before my full 11 years with the company. And I was honestly chasing titles and new opportunities. I had my son in 2023, and to this day, he makes me feel like Superwoman. And so I jumped back into work 8 weeks postpartum and didn't have daycare. My mom was kind of in and out because she still works full time. And so I made it through a very challenging harvest with a baby on my hip. And, you know, no one could tell me anything. I was like, well, what else can I do? At that point, we were well into the process for organic certification. I had a number of buyers, grape sales were up, and I felt like I was at a point where I've done all I can do here. And so I left, and not too long after leaving, Violet May passes away. And I actually brought Violet May out to the ranch 2 weeks after becoming the Monte Rosso vineyard manager. And so she was my sidekick for the entire time. And I remember I went to lunch with somebody who I sold fruit to, and he was like, if you want a way to honor her, I'll gift you a barrel of 2023 Monte Rosso Cab Franc. And that was wine that I had farmed. And that quickly led into me being like, oh, Violet's Paradise. Like, I don't think I'm going to get the Monte Rosso Vineyard trademark. And then I got the Monte Rosso Vineyard trademark. And then I got 5 more wines. And it just exploded fast of what originally started as this way to tell people her story. A lot of people had met Violet May, and I was obviously very devastated. And so it was kind of this way to like honor her memory. But then fast forward 4 months, and I'm quitting what was my new job and leaning into this and vineyard consulting full time. So yeah, by December of 2024, I had the 5 Monte Rosso vineyard designate wines. And then I consult for a couple who owns a wedding venue, and I'm helping them build a vineyard out, and they were looking for sparkling. And I thought, oh my gosh, this brand is rooted in grief. I don't want everybody crying every time they drink a bottle of Violet's Paradise. So I need to add some levity to this. Let's throw in a sparkling, but because I didn't farm it, let's make it 100% charitable. So I had always had like the scholarship as part of the brand, and then the sparkling wine being 100% charitable. I was like, okay, what are things that I really care about? And one is just access into the wine industry by people who maybe don't have direct links or the education or just even know where to go. And so I partnered with the Eurasian Project for my first charitable wine. And so Violet's Paradise, it's kind of wild, has just absolutely exploded in 11 months from being just this way to honor her to being a way to celebrate my career and to just be a catalyst and maybe a gateway for people to have a direct link to make a difference, not just in the space, but within the community at large. So yeah, Violet's Paradise is untamable at this point. And crazy how it's just evolved. And I think it's great. The anniversary of Violet's passing is actually on Friday. So I get really emotional at the duality of, oh man, this has been my expression of grief of just amplifying her legacy forever.
You're listening to The Wonderful World of Wine, and we are your hosts, Mark Lenzi and Kim Simone, exploring all things wine with you. For more information about us, you can go to our website, thewww.wine. Today, our special guest is Brenae Royal, and you can find all about her at her website, violetsparadise.com. You can find her social media and all her beautiful wines on there. You can find our past episodes on SoundCloud and iTunes, and our program is supported by Franklin Public Radio. So we're speaking with Brenae Royal, and I have to ask a question based on you as a farmer. You grow all these grapes, you putting in such hard work, and you selling the grapes. Has there ever been a time where you sold grapes to somebody and you tasted their wine and you said, "Oh my God, what did they do to my grapes?" Right?
Oh no.
It must go. It must go both ways, right? You must taste beautiful wines, and then there must be a time where you say they wrecked your grapes. No?
Yeah, there were a couple times. I can't say it happened too often, but the one that's popping into my mind was a new buyer for the vineyard, but not for the industry. And, that's always a very challenging thing, especially with somebody who's established, is telling them, hey, I don't actually think I want the vineyard name on this. With the way that I was able to manage grape sales, I actually had trademark authority. And so I gained that by having all 100 or so wines in front of my executive leadership to show like, hey, this is how I'm doing my job. You guys can trust me with this. And then I could turn around and have the evaluation with each of the producers. And so, yeah, sitting down in that instance of, hey, this just isn't meeting like the benchmarks of how all these other wines are is hard. And this individual was very, very defensive. It's kind of like calling somebody's kid ugly. Like you're telling them like this is not good enough. And it's a challenging thing, but it was a very contentious meeting. And certainly being a woman, that was what they thought was a very easy way to kind of come at me, and it's not. But yeah, I will say it's not an easy thing. It's not something I like to do. And certainly when I used to vet buyers, you kind of knew who you even wanted to have that conversation with. So a lot of the times when somebody new or somebody that I approached, I already had an idea of their winemaking style. I knew Monte Rosso wouldn't stand out as an outlier via price or even just stylistically within that winemaker's portfolio. And so it wouldn't ostracize their demographic with the price as well. So I would do a lot of due diligence prior. So I will say too, especially to this individual's point, is sometimes things are happening in the winery or with the wines that are out of your control. You certainly don't expect to get to that last point of, hey, here's the trademark approval, but sometimes you do. And yeah, it's challenging. It's not fun. And I try and vet that out well before grapes are picked.
So I wanted to ask about your wines in your own label. In the Violet's Paradise label, you have more of an emphasis on red grapes, but you do have some interesting white grapes in addition to that Semillon that you have planted. So you've got some hybrids, some unusual things in that plot as well, I think.
Yeah, so we mapped the Semillon in 2018, and that was because we knew that there was Palomino interplanted pretty heavily in the Semillon.
Interesting.
Yeah, and the buyers at the time didn't want any of the Palomino. However, that was like the same time that Gallo was going to make their first Semillon. And so by the time Gallo picked, we only really had Palomino. And I remember we went to a tasting of Semillons to try and just understand different styles of it. And ours was more or less a sherry. Like, so, you can only make that kind of mistake with the home team once. And so we mapped it the following year. And yeah, we found Lenoir, Pinot St. George, Sylvaner, Full Blanche, Semillon, Palomino. There's a little bit of Burger in there. Yeah, you look and
Wow.
so that includes rattlesnakes. So we only looked super hard in that block because we really wanted to understand it. And certainly by the time we got to harvest, everybody's sections, they would understand what the makeup was.
Mhm.
And we wouldn't, select out any of the outlier varieties. So yeah, I'm calling it 100% Semillon because the predominant variety in there is in fact Semillon. But yeah, there is influence from those other varieties.
So, Brenae, talk about you have 5 wines, a sparkling wine. What is the production amount of them, and how can our listeners get them to try?
So the production's really small, all sub 125 cases or 125 cases. And the big way right now is online. I will say this brand wasn't supposed to be as big as it is today. It was really supposed to be a one-off. And so the way that I will always kind of use this brand is exactly that, a collection, which is why all of the labels have such detail and they're all different because you kind of want to have them as a collection. Online at violetsparadise.com is the best way to get them. I have pickup parties. So the fall wines are actually being bottled as we speak, and those are set to come out in August, but then there's a pickup party in California on September 6th where people can come and have the wines, pick up their wines, get refunded on shipping costs.
Is it 125 total cases or 125 cases of each?
Each.
Each. Okay. Very small.
Small, very, very small. Again, I mean, it just wasn't this wasn't supposed to be what it is. And I will say I've had to pivot every day because there's a lot of excitement around the brand. So now it's in a couple of wholesale locations. I'm gonna go onto the East Coast in August and do a couple placements there. Again, I'm blown away. It just wasn't ever supposed to be this. So it is a little bit willy-nilly on a direct path of where it will be available, but you can always find it online.
So your labels are beautiful. You have Violet May's picture on the labels. Do you think a lot of the passion for the wine is based on your passion for her? Or
I
and I
will
would say what do you feel draws the wine lovers to the wines?
I will say because it's a full circle moment. It's not just the wine, it's not just Violet May, it's not just the vineyard, it's not just me, it's not just even my team, but it's the collective of all of us. 2023 was a monumental year without us knowing it in the moment. And so when I think about these wines, and certainly when people see the label, I hope it just kind of transports them to a similar feeling for them of when you didn't realize you were putting together this puzzle and then you see it and you're like, oh, I had no idea what I was living through. And it's grief, it's fondness, it's happiness, all in one when I see these bottles. And all of those labels are inspired by real life photos of her in the vineyard. And so the Violet's Paradise, the inaugural collection, just really makes me reflect. And then it also makes me look forward to a lot of stuff too, because I feel like I'm more appreciative now that she's passed away because she meant so much to me for so long. I'm like, well, what else am I missing right now? And that I should probably pay more attention to. And I'm sorry, I'm getting
No.
but I don't think it's one thing. And me and my team with Violet May there alongside us farmed these wines and now made these wines. And so this is really a full circle kind of achievement for me.
It's a great story. You always hear about winery dogs, and I think there were books. People put pictures of the winery dogs, and I'd imagine you spent hundreds of hours with her in the vineyard and
Yeah.
experienced a lot together. So I think it's a great story. Kim and I are all about stories in the wine world, so I'm sure our listeners will appreciate it as well.
Thank you. Yeah, and I mean the wines are fantastic. They're beautiful. And so again, I think, we can all resonate as people in our own professions, certainly with our own pets and just even companions. Like I hope people can really be transported to a time when they didn't realize it was as significant as it was and can reflect fondly on it, even with the sadness that comes with it.
Can you give our listeners just a little bit of like, I don't know, just a little idea of the style of your wines? I know you talked about the vineyards themselves, but as far as the reds, is there like a characteristic that kind of flows through all of the wines? Is there something that there's a unique point of view that all of the wines kind of show?
Yeah, so I'll kind of go back a little bit too with all of the external partners who I worked with who bought Monte Rosso fruit is in the trademark evaluation. It was never around styles. It was more so it was around, what was that vintage doing? And are all these wines stylistically speaking to all the nuance of where their block was and how the weather was and those kinds of things. And so in the 2023 Monte Rosso Violet's Paradise wines, it was a cool year. And something that I found with all five of the still wines is there's this really great like earthiness that kind of carries through. And one of my favorites so far is on the Semillon because the texture on the palate is like sea air. Like, when you go to the ocean or something and you feel like you have that saltiness on your tongue.
Sure.
It's what the Semillon is giving. When you get into the red wines, it's not as pronounced in the Grenache, but certainly on the Cab Franc Zin and Cabernet Sauvignon, you get that same kind of, not necessarily the texture per se, but that feeling of just earthiness, almost like you do have a little bit of sand on your tongue. And I love that. I think it's something that over the course of the 10 years or so that I was farming it, the weather didn't always lean in to that coolness that we had in 2023. So it's a little bit harder to extrapolate. Additional threads would include just the general Monte Rosso acidity. You can taste a Monte Rosso wine blind and pick it up pretty quickly because of that acidity that carries the wine, that spiciness. The tannin structure on the Violet's Paradise wines aren't big. They're not offensive. Sometimes drinking mountain cabs or any mountain reds can kind of be a shock to the palate when you first have them. Certainly with 2 years of age, they've relaxed a little bit, but these wines are really, really approachable. And I can't say that about all Monte Rosso wines because usually they're food necessary. And in this lineup, you could certainly enjoy it without having a meal. But yeah, there's a lot of texture in these wines, is what I would say kind of carries through. There's weight, but it's not going to coat your palate and make it so you can't taste anything else. They're just very, very beautiful wines. And I might sound really biased.
Well, you should. They're your babies, right?
A baby. But no, they're really nice. And what I love about them too is they're all very complementary to each other. And you could go really any direction within those five wines and kind of see the partnership between them because of the style and just the vintage. I think 2023 vintage is a really spectacular vintage.
And you also have a sparkling wine.
The sparkling wine is in partnership with the Verasian Project. So when I was thinking as Violet's Paradise was growing, I, as a farmer first, only want to release wines that I have farmed or have led the direction of farming on. So I was like, oh man, I want to add levity to the brand, but I didn't farm this. How can I tie it in? I've got the scholarship. what else can we do with it? And so I started thinking of things that I'm a part of, and I'm actually a mentor for a number of organizations, but came to partner with the Eurasian project in this first one. So we did make a custom dosage, and that's why the makeup of that sparkling is 63% Chardonnay, 60 or 34%, excuse me, of Pinot Noir, and then there's about 3% of Pinot Meunier, and then there's a tiny smidgen of Sauvignon Blanc in there. So it's also another wine that has kind of surprised people because of like that balancedness in it. It does have a high RS on it, and so I don't tell people the RS because it would make maybe more experienced wine drinkers kind of shy away a little bit, especially if they don't like sweet wines. However, that Sauvignon Blanc really cuts it, and so you get this really nice, balanced, don't need it to be in a mimosa sparkling wine. So it's been a fun one. Everybody loves bubbles, and it's all for a good cause. So 50% will go to the Violet's Paradise Ag Scholarship that will benefit incoming and current college students studying any major under the School of Ag, and they could utilize it in any way that they want. And then the other 50% will go to the Eurasian Project and support their initiatives.
So the Eurasian Project is actually an organization that we at Commonwealth Wine School work with. So they provide scholarships for people to either start their education in the wine world or continue their education, get scholarships. That's kind of how we come in to be a provider of some of those certifications. So we've actually had a couple of students who have benefited from those initiatives come through the school and start building their certifications for their resume for being in the wine industry. So it's exciting to be part of a project that's so beneficial to so many people and is really needed.
Yeah, and we'll keep that one going. So that will just keep being made and will be a perpetual release.
Super cool.
Yeah.
Brenae, can you talk about your passion and your fight for diversity and sustainability in agriculture? It's your passion. Can you explain to the listeners why it's such an important thing in agriculture?
Yeah, I will say with diversity and sustainability, those are kind of one and the same for me because I don't think you can be sustainable being a monolith. And that's in all things, your way of thinking, your way of doing things, how you move about in the world. I think you need to constantly be evolving. And so on the diversity aspect of things, you just never know what you don't know. So I need something new to show me something else because as open-minded as we all might be, we all also have our habits, our ways of thinking, our ways of doing things. And so I can't stress enough that it's more than just growing your business or making money. It's a way to continue to move forward and to just continue to get better, quite honestly. And in order to be sustainable, you have to continue to evolve with the changing trends, whether they be consumer-based or health-based or even technology. You have to keep growing. And so if I'm not being exposed to all of these new things and ways of thinking, it's what am I doing? Eventually you run into a wall because you've gone as far as you could go with the tools that you've had in your belt. And so it has to be more than race in a lot of ways. And I think a lot of people hear diversity and think, oh, you just want a bunch more people that aren't white on the team. And it's so much more than that. I think that's such a limited view of just what diversity genuinely is. And so, yeah, I want to fight for it because being one of the only Black women in agriculture at this level, I've always utilized it as a position of power. And that's because I have enough soft skills to talk to people and level with people and show them like different can be good, different can be safe. It's uncomfortable for sure, but look at what you can do. And not just that, but look at the weight that you take off yourself by keeping the door open and having somebody else come in and have the same passion as you. I don't want to ever be the only because that sounds like a lot of work. I'm trying to go home and hang out with my son. And so I don't want to be this like only beacon of light doing cool stuff because I'm the only one with access. It's like, no, no, no. Like, let's bring in all these new people as well because they're going to take what I've done and run with it and expand it. And then they're going to crack open new things that none of us are currently thinking about. And so I think it can relieve a lot of pressure that maybe some of us who are here feel by just allowing, new energy. So yeah, diversity and sustainability are one and the same.
Do you feel like you getting to the place where you are at such a young age also had kind of an impact on that and having kind of this a little bit of a, I don't know, fresh perspective than all of us old people who've been in the industry for a while?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, because 12 years also isn't a very long time. And so, yeah, I think back to 2013. Here I was thinking I was the only out here on West Side Road or out at Monte Rosso, and I was literally a stone's throw away from Brown Estate or other Black people in wine up the street. Like, I didn't have that knowledge point to say anything other than I'm the only one out here. And so, yeah, I think I sit on kind of that middle ground of how I remember it when I started and then the opportunity I see today and how I don't believe it's being fully utilized. And so, yeah, I think being younger allows me to maybe speak to both sides of the table because I can understand a lot of the generation before me and I can kind of understand the generation coming up after me. So I think I can be relevant to both. And so that allows a bit of connection and bridging.
Brenae, you grew up farming and it's your passion, but you had an early calling for it. Do you feel the wine world does enough to promote or highlight the actual growing of grapes, the agricultural part of grapes? Like even from the point of Gallo, I mean, a huge company, my experience with be like a tech note tells you, here's how it was grown, here's where it was picked, here's the soil. But do you think the industry as a whole does enough to show the importance of the agricultural side?
No, and I wish there was. I will say this came to a head for me in 2021 because I was in every major wine publication in 2020, and it all started with young Black female. And my first call out was like, well, when are you going to stop calling me young? Because that's going to get weird and I'm going to yell. And then the second thing was, that is not how I introduced myself. Like by 2020, I was the vineyard manager of this historic vineyard for 5 years. And the most significant thing that comes to mind for you is that I'm a Black woman doing it. Like, okay, I can't change that. That's not how I walk up to people and introduce myself. That's inherent, and you can look at me and see it. Let's talk about all these cool, innovative ways we're bringing this 100-plus-year-old vineyard into this new millennium and making this old world style wine relevant to new producers and new consumers. I don't think there's enough on the ag side, and that's from questions very early in my career of people not even realizing that grapes came from grapevines, which gave me heartburn to understand people didn't understand wine as an agricultural product. But I also think people just don't understand the level of intensity that goes into vineyard management and just all of the different facets of it. And the fact that your biggest variable, weather, is completely out of your control. And so you're having to manage all these scientific things happening between the vine, the ground, the water, the nutrients, the air, the atmosphere, all these things. And I don't think people really realize your brain is constantly moving, all while knowing your first priority is the safety of the team on site, the humans that come to work every day and are humans like you who might be having a bad day and may not be able to jump into the vineyard today because they're so checked out of whatever's going on in their personal life. So maybe they need to garden for the day. And so there's all these balancing acts that you do multiple times an hour, multiple times a day to make sure that things are moving forward because the vineyard never stops. It's similar to life. It just doesn't stop. And so having to keep all these different timelines and again, managing personalities and managing safety and managing expectations of a product that is going to drive your revenue based on the quality. And so I need all these other factors to be lining up to really give me the quality to meet this $135 bottle of wine at all times. And so it is a constant motion. I will say it's not very easy. And there were a couple vintages in there when living on site that it was very depressing, whether it was labor issues or you just didn't have equipment or weather was beyond a normal range of heat or even coolness. And so it can become a lot because it just never stops. And so I don't think people have enough insight into it. And I wish certainly when it comes to me is like let's just talk about what's going on in the vineyard because there's so much more cool stuff than anything that's going on with me personally. Like let's really look at the cool new farming that we're doing, certainly the transition to organic that I started during my time there. Like let's talk about those things because those are gonna outlive me, outlive anything I'm going to do. So let's talk about things that are going to carry on for another 139 years.
You make such a good point about that what goes on in the vineyard, all of those little details, it's not necessarily something that the end consumer thinks about either. And it's all of those little things that go into the bottle of wine. And, oftentimes we'll talk about like, oh, the romance of making wine. It's like, well, really, it's farming and it's dirty and it's, it's all of those things that you talk about and the weather situations and it's people, it's snakes, all that stuff. And that realness that I'm sure when you're talking to people, you're doing it for us. So I'm sure you're doing it for everybody else too, to kind of bring to the conversation about how it actually feels in the vineyard is really sort of refreshing and eye-opening.
I'm usually like dressed up too. So they're like, oh my God. You're so glamorous. You're so beautiful. And
You're like, no.
I does not recognize me right now because I'm not absolutely haggard like I usually do on the vineyard. Like the guys know what I look like. You guys don't. Like I'm
funny.
totally catfishing everybody right now. So yeah, it's not glamorous at all. I think it's very rewarding. The best moments of my life have probably happened on the vineyard. And so it's a different type of reward. But yeah, I don't think people really understand the balancing act, as I mentioned, of you've got a vineyard growing, but then you've got people management and then even your well-being. You got to be thinking of a lot of different things. And while I was managing Monte Rosso, I would always be planned out about 2 weeks. And so certainly later in my career, whenever I had to scrap plan A or plan B, that was always like a laughable moment for me because I am not a reactive farmer. I'm a proactive farmer. So if I'm proactive and I'm still scrapping my plans, like we're probably seeing something we have not seen before. And so I would always laugh because it's like, oh man, like here we are in plan C, D, or E. And now we're really being tested to get through something we have to get through every year. I call vineyard management like it's a deck of cards. You just don't know what hand you're going to get. And so you're playing the same game, but you may not have all the same tools. And so it kept it fun, kept it interesting. You're constantly learning. Like I said, it's a huge reward for sure. And the relationships you build as well. It's an indescribable. Violet May's nickname was Violeta and La Gorda, the fat because she's very food motivated. And she was actually bilingual. And so I remember I discovered that at like 6 months because I was telling her to come outside for harvest with me. And she was just staring at me like she didn't understand. And then I said it in Spanish. And then she popped right on up and went out the door. And I was like, oh my God. And went like told the guys like, Violeta is bilingual.
She's been paying attention,
Yeah. The vineyard management piece and the agriculture piece, it's a different ball game. And I would say too, even for the cost of wine, like I haven't gone too deep into explaining like the pricing of the wine, but I'm like, here's everything that I had to do in the field. And then, oh, here it is in the winery. And so there's all these associated costs with getting to this product of wine. Yeah. And this isn't just a cash grab. Like this is really what it cost. Like I'm not going to sell out of Violet's Paradise and then go buy an island. So it's like everything is associated with this level of care that's given both in the vineyard and the wine. And so, yeah, I don't think there's enough transparency, especially on the ag side, for people to really understand. And I think there's more coming. Certainly, I want to be at the forefront of that too. It's just really giving people an insight to the level of intensity, both mentally and physically, that goes into farming. And I would say for any crop.
I certainly get that question a lot for classes where people are like, well, why does the wine cost what it costs? And now I will have more ammunition to, to give them after talking to you and hearing all about that the attention and the hands-on and the people stuff and just all of the things that go on. So yeah, I can't wait to field that question the next time I get
it. Go get them.
I'm gonna do it.
Brenae, thank you so much. I'm sure the listeners appreciate hearing your story. That's the whole idea when we started this show, Kim and I, was to bring people like yourself to our listeners to hear what goes on in the wine world. And it's just been amazing hearing your story and explaining to the listeners what vineyard management incorporates. So I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you guys for having me. This was wonderful.
Thank you for listening to us today on The Wonderful World of Wine. We have been your hosts, Mark Lenzi and Kim Simone, and today with our special guest, Brenae Royal. You can find her information at violetsparadise.com and more information about Mark and myself on our website, thewww.wine. We are supported by Franklin Public Radio, and you can find our past episodes on SoundCloud and iTunes. Cheers!
Cheers!
Wine.